Good morning. Let's go to read 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. Cada uno de ustedes ponga al servicio de los demás el don que haya recibido, administrando fielmente la gracia de Dios en sus diversas formas. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others, as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms.
All right. Good morning. What a beautiful day it is to gather together and to be able to get together. And what a blessing it is to be able to, and a privilege it is to be able to speak to you this morning and to share God's Word. As it was mentioned, I'm Benjamin. I'm 19, and of course I'm part of AIM. So as Louise read this morning, we're going to be talking about service out of 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. So serving one another is kind of where I want to focus this morning. But if you will, real quick, we're going to look at Romans chapter 12, verse 6. And in this verse, we read about different ways that we can use our gifts to serve one another. So starting in verse 6, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, interpretation to our faith. If service, in our serving, the one who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who contributes in generosity, and the one who leads with zeal, the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. So that's just a list of different ways, of different spiritual gifts that we have been given in ways that we can use them to serve. But going back to 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10, we see the idea of serving. And that's what I want us to look at this morning. And I think we all have a basic understanding of what it means to serve. Serving is the act of doing something for someone else. That's someone, of course, not being yourself. It's sacrificing your time and resources for someone else and for their better. So when we are serving one another, we are doing something primarily for the benefit and goodwill of another person or a group of people. So why are we called to do this? Why are we called to serve one another? Why are we called to give up our time? Why do I have to go help a member of the church repaint his bathroom when I have homework I want to get done? Or when I want to go hang out with my friends? Why do we have to give up our time? In Mark chapter 10, verse 45, we read about Jesus and how he served. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. We see that even Jesus came not to be served necessarily by us, but to be a servant and to serve other people and to ultimately die on the cross. So if we wish to be more like Jesus,